Hello and welcome to today's video on sentence forms. Let me explain some advantages of knowing not just how to write about sentence forms, but also how to use them. So these are the four things I want to teach you today. Firstly, why teachers might tell you to write about sentence forms. Many teachers are still doing this. Why the examiner says, well, actually you don't have to, even though the question tells you you should. Then I'm going to look at how to write about complex sentences with a list. And then I'm going to show you that there will always be complex sentences in the description that you look at in the exam, and that description will nearly always be in a list, which will therefore always help you to get the marks. And then how to write about your own complex sentences. How to write your own complex sentences to bring your writing to life and make your descriptions vivid. So this will help you not only in question 5 of your language paper, but also in the reading paper as well. So a double whammy. Why the confusion arises about complex sentences in the first place. Teachers who've been to meetings that AQA have held have been told, look, you don't have to write about simple complex sentences anymore, even though the question asks you to. Instead, students should write about the use of statements or dialogue or rhetorical questions. Well, the problem with that is it's not very useful because most descriptions won't have any of those sentence forms. And so that's not really helpful. However, they will always have complex sentences and lists. I'm pretty certain of that. Another problem is that the model answers in the mark scheme for June and November 2017 don't include a reference to sentence forms, so it looks like you don't have to do it. Unfortunately, many teachers are still looking at the Specimen paper, and the Specimen's papers say that you do need to write about sentence forms. And then finally, this means that because teachers want you to get a top grade, many of them are still advising you to do it. So the examiner's report for June 2017 suggests that students usually wrote very badly about sentence forms, and they made up stuff that didn't really work, and then repeated that there was no need to write about them at all. This is the examiner's comment in one of the Specimen papers. The long, detailed, complex sentence perhaps suggests the movement of the many tourists on their tram trip into town. So in this bit, Graham Greene was describing a tram trip into Brighton, and it's from his novel Brighton Rock. And for copyright reasons, I'm not allowed to show you that. But if you did read it, you'll see that there's no focus on the movement of the crowd at all. This is just invented by the examiner for this one sentence, and the examiner's actually written something that's pretty gibberish, and that's why they've used the word perhaps, because even the examiner realises actually what I'm saying is probably not true. And I think that's a reason why the examiners in the actual exams have then said, actually we've made a bit of a mistake here asking you to write about sentence forms, and you don't have to do it. So what I've done is I've taken Brighton Rock and I've translated it so that the sentences are exactly the same length, with all the verbs in the same place, all the punctuation in the same place, but I'm writing about a train trip to Paris. They flooded into Paris from St Pancras every hour, stumbled down the Champs-Élysées, crowding the tops of trams, dismounted in lemming-like crowds into the clamour of angry traffic. The tricolour danced on the street lamps. That's the French flag, by the way. The ornate buildings stood grandly in ranks like a Napoleonic regiment. A con man demonstrating Hunt the Lady, buskers playing, man-made beaches by the river, and billboards desperate to capture your wallet in vibrant colours clashing across the city's walls. It seemed quite easy to Mr. Salles to be lost in Paris. So here you can see the long, complex sentence has got lots of different ideas in it. Each idea is a separate description, and they're just listed. So when you write about the long complex sentence, you can always write about the effect of the list. Well, let's see what that effect was. Here you can see I'm not interested in any way in onward movement. It's not the movement of the tram that interests me. I'm much more interested, as Graham Greene is in his original, in the spectacle of the city, perhaps its chaos, certainly its vibrant nature, and perhaps an element of threat in the foreign environment. It's totally irrelevant that this is a complex sentence, and much more relevant that it is a list. So if we just go back to that, you can see that the buskers appear quite threatening, and the billboards are desperate to get your money, and it's described in the way that they will capture your wallet. And so it seems a slightly dangerous city to be in, or one that at least is trying to rip you off. Okay, so in my answer I will use the words complex sentence because, as we have seen, the examiners at the beginning seem to be pointing us that way, rather than just saying a list. Okay, I'm also going to use it because in virtually any piece of description you're likely to meet in any exam, you will definitely meet a complex sentence, which I think will almost certainly be a list. And the list will talk about the structure of the sentence. So I'm going to write about the point of this particular list. If I'm really good, I'll try to write about more than one purpose to the list. And this is what will get the marks. This is what will tell the examiner that my answer is sophisticated, which is that word in the mark scheme. Okay, here's my sentence. The long complex sentence works as a detailed list of sights that reflect the spectacle of the city and how the travellers can get lost in its many attractions and perhaps its hidden dangers. And I'm definitely going to score marks here because I've come up with 3 different reasons for that list. And that's my top tip to you. Come up with more than one reason for your list and you will get those high marks. This is an exam answer given to me by a viewer called Queen A. Thank you very much, Queen A. And he or she says, "Hi, could you please let me know how many marks this would be out of?" So I'm annoyingly not going to give it a mark, but it is a high mark answer. And when we get down to the bottom here, you'll see how Queen A writes about the list. The writer uses the verb tremble to show the effects of the storm on the passengers, revealing how vulnerable they are compared to it. Trembled has connotations of a young child who is in fear, which could suggest that nature is so powerful it's almost inflicting a punishment on them. The writer then uses the metaphor of the wheels that creaked and groaned. This inanimate object, creaking, could also mirror a cry for help, foreshadowing and putting fear into the reader's mind as to the effects of the storm on the passengers. The onomatopoeia, such as groaned, creates a more vivid image, making us hear the brutal effects of the storm. Then we get to the comment on the sentence forms. The writer also uses long and complex sentences to mirror the ongoing effects of the storm, and so the people in the coach almost feel as if the brutal weather conditions will not come to an end. So this is a good answer because it takes the sentence form and it relates it to the overall meaning of the passage. So there's a point in having those complex sentences, which isn't a made-up point. It relates exactly to the brutal conditions that Queen A has spotted the writer is describing. But Queen A then goes on to a second explanation to make sure they get high marks. It could also mirror how slow time is moving for them because of the storm, which would also fit the passage because they have to go through mud or whatever. There could be a quotation in there to help, but actually that's a really good way of writing about the complex sentence. Now let's jump ahead and think, well, even if I don't have to write about the complex sentence in the exam, would this still get me high marks? Yes, it would, because you've kept it really focused on what the writer is trying to convey in terms of the meaning. But another reason it's helpful to you, I'll skip this bit, is because it's going to give you the real skill in using your own complex sentences. Before I move to that, you should notice the idea of doubt. If you put perhaps in your answer, it suggests to the examiner that you're thinking about things from more than one point of view, and they automatically want to give you higher marks. When you're also writing, you want to be thinking about contrast and also the senses, and I'm going to show you a couple of Dickens examples that will help you do that. So this is an extract from Little Dorrit. Dickens describes a London rainstorm. In the country, the rain would have developed 1,000 fresh scents. Every drop would have had its bright association with some beautiful form of growth or life. In the city, it developed only foul, stale smells and was a sickly, lukewarm, dirt-stained, wretched addition to the gutters. So in my explanation of the effect of the complex sentence, I will talk about this having two lists, and they're both used to develop a contrast, and the purpose of that contrast is going to be to show, on the one hand, the unappealing side of London, and on the other, how wonderful nature is in comparison. So it's really easy to write about that, but in your own descriptions, if you use contrast like this, you will be getting much, much higher marks. Well, this video's gone on for ages actually now, hasn't it? So I think I'll make another video on how to write using a list, and I'll just leave this here. You've seen a good idea of how to write. You've understood hopefully what contrast is and why it will help your description, and most of all, you've understood how to write about complex sentences using a list. Let's just end the show there and go back to that very first slide. Oh dear, the second slide, which told you the 4 things that I was going to teach you. Go back and test yourself now, see if you can remember the answer to those 4 things, and good luck with your revision. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.